go back to Illustrator, I say yes here as well, so it updates, and immediately the resolution, the PPI value, is much better, 351. It's still above 300, so if I wanted to use this in print with its current state, it would work fine. But I'm not worried about that value anymore because I will vectorize this anyway, and once you vectorize something, so once you trace an image, after that there's no point in talking about resolution, because vector art is resolution independent. So no more PPI to concern about. So let me choose that preset that we had before. Remember how long it took before to render this. Now if I choose 3 colors, see how much faster it will give us the result. So I'm not saying this is a good result, but we can definitely see the improvement in the speed of this whole tracing to render this. Now if I choose 3 colors, see how much faster it will give us the result. So I'm not saying this is a good result, but we can definitely see the improvement in the speed of this whole tracing process. But probably 3 colors is too less. So let's just go up to 6 colors. So we are allowing Illustrator a bit more space to work with. If that's still not enough, I can go up even to 16 colors, let's say. And yes, that's where we start to see the differentiation between the feathers and the beak. That's much closer to what we would expect to see when we look at a seagull. So the palette is still set to limited. Now, what if I change that to automatic? Now, this obviously looks so much better. If you look at the beak, the eyes, there's so much more detail there. But it got better because we chose automatic color palette, which actually picked 623 colors. Obviously, if we use that much colors, it has to look better or more closer to the original photograph. By the way, a camera normally captures 16.7 million colors. That's a standard RGB 8-bit per channel color profile. But without getting too technical, after this point, it's really up to you what you want to achieve. So you can even change the mode back to grayscale if you don't actually need colors, you just want it to be grayscale. Decide how much gray values you allow Illustrator to use. So you can have a really good black and white version or grayscale version, or we can go back to the color mode. Once again, we get back to the result we've seen before. Now still with paths, you can also play around, and if you reduce it, you will get a little bit softer result, so less sharp edges there. If you increase it to the maximum value, you will have lots of little details sticking out, and this is again getting closer to the original photograph. So if you want to create a vector version of a photograph that looks very photorealistic, you can start with increasing colors and paths all the way to the maximum. But if you want to have an abstracted, simplified version, which looks more like a vector art, then I would recommend to reduce the paths down to almost a minimum value. And also probably try to reduce the amount of colors used, because the higher it is, the more photorealistic it will look like. So here, colors is really that seesaw that we had with threshold in the previous examples. Again, it's a balancing act, and it's up to you whether you prefer a bit more abstract version or you like the realistic version. When you move further down, you also have options like corners, which can again change the look and feel of these lines that Illustrator creates. So if I increase that up to 100%, it will look like this. If I reduce it down to 0%, it will look like that. Once again, 0% is a bit more simplified. If I reduce the noise also down to 1 pixel, that is actually doing something opposite. So this value, the lower it is, the more closer you get to the original photo. While if you drag it all the way to the right, it will get more abstracted. Having the noise set to 100 pixels, the maximum value, we actually lost all the differentiation between the feathers. But once again, as I said, this is all about playing around with these values and see what works best for the current image you are working with. I just really wanted to see the iris, so that's why I was messing around with the values. And in this case, I don't have to turn on ignore white. It won't really make much difference because we have a transparent background. So when you use a PSD file, which was already masked, then you don't have to worry about the ignore white option. So let's click on expand now that we've done this, and we can see our final version here. Now let's move down to the image with the girl, and I'm just going to quickly reapply the settings that we had there. I'm going to first of all choose color. It's going to be automatic, and the values can work the way they are set here. So I can just click on preview. And there you go. That is the vectorized version. It looks very realistic. But once we zoom closer, you will start to see all those areas, the vector objects that the tracing feature created. So this is again that decision that you have to make, whether you want to see a lot of detail or whether you want to get a little bit smoother result. So I can switch the palette from automatic to limited. That's a quick way to really get an abstracted version. So as you can see now, it's only using 30 colors, and that's what it's managed to create from it. So it's using like an average of the most common colors and distributes them in this limited color palette. But you can further reduce that if you want. Let's just say 10 colors. If I only allow that much, we will see how that looks. So she's getting more and more green. But don't forget that you can always change the colors later. So if you only have 10 colors, it will be much easier to play around with those colors and refine them. While if you use a lot of colors, then it will be always more complex to make amends to them. But just in case you prefer the photorealistic vector art, then I would recommend instead of automatic to use full tone. That's going to include the most amount of colors, and obviously that will take the longest time as well to render, but we will see how it looks once it goes through. There you go. This one actually used 8,000, almost 9,000 colors, and it had to create 11, almost 12,000 parts. But if I zoom closer, we will see much less sharp edges, and even the skin looks much smoother. Of course, after a while it still gets blocky, but as long as you look at it from a distance, it looks almost like a photograph. Even the little fine hair details we can see, and they are separate. I will click on expand and close the trace panel. And that is just a simple indication of how much work Illustrator did in the background. All these parts had to be generated and calculated from the original image to be able to turn this into a vector artwork. But looking at all the examples that we've worked through, you can see the range of features and options you have when you're tracing images and turning them into vector artwork. It really comes down to the source material, what you want to achieve, and how you use the tracing settings here in Illustrator. So now that we went through all these settings, in the next video we will have a look at how we actually can change the colors and work with these traced vector objects.